Hello everybody, welcome. My name is Chris Shelton. This is Instinctive Adventures. Today's video is going to be just a little bit different. I actually don't do very many gear reviews, but I feel like this one's kind of rather important. I just came back from a trip. I went hunting in Colorado for 11 days. I tried to do some DIY, over-the-counter, public land, elk hunting, and I had an amazing time. I'm not going to get super in-depth with that today. I'm just going to focus on one thing at a time. I'm going to kind of break up. I've got so many thoughts in my head after this trip. I've got just a lot going on in here. So I'm going to break it up into little chunks, try and make it a little bit more digestible. And we're going to start it off today by doing just a small gear review. Should be a short video, should be somewhat informational, and hopefully it's helpful. The piece of gear I'm going to talk about today is kind of important. It's something that I wasn't even going to consider going without. So it's kind of weird for a traditional bow hunter to be talking about something so techy, but that's okay. It is 2023 and technology is, here to stay. So the piece of gear we're going to be talking about today is the Motorola Defy. It is a satellite communication device that connects to your phone. That's the box. This is the actual device. It's just a tiny little guy. Satellite communication devices are not new. It's kind of an old school thing. Old school relatively, I guess, within the past 20 years. Sat phones are an old piece of technology at this point. It's kind of outdated. When most people think about communication in the backcountry, I think the number one thing they think about is probably a Garmin inReach or an inReach Mini 2. And Garmin also has something they call the Messenger. They all pretty much do the same thing as this with minor exceptions. This thing is strictly a communication device. It does not do any type of, GPS navigational stuff like the inReach does. So that kind of explains the price difference between the two. This is very similar to like the Garmin Messenger, where it's just a communication device. However, this little guy is quite a bit cheaper. There's really, I would consider three main options. So you got the Garmin inReach, you've got this guy, the Motorola Defy, and the Zoleo. Those are the three that you'll hear people talking about the most. This Motorola is relatively new. It's kind of the new kid on the block, and it's pretty similar to some of the other ones. So I've got my phone, I'm looking at the prices right now. So you can get an inReach Mini 2 for just about $400. The Zoleo runs about $199, and I've heard great things about both of those devices. The inReach is pretty much the standard for backcountry communications. They all do basically the same thing. So they all have the ability to connect to a satellite and send messages to and from family. They all have an SOS button. This one's the orange guy right here. This guy actually has two other buttons, obviously the power button and a check-in button, which if you just hit that button or you hit it on the app, it just sends your location to your designated person, which in my case was my father. I was just super impressed with this guy. There's a lot of areas, obviously, when you're in the backcountry that you don't have cell service. And, I was going solo, so I felt it was kind of irresponsible to go without something like this. I know people of the past did it so many times, and it's just different now. It's kind of silly to go without this because it's relatively inexpensive. You can get one of these for $150, and that includes a year's worth of the data plan, basically. That's like a no-brainer. And not only was it cheap, but it worked. It worked really well. There was only a couple times where I had to resend messages because I had, a literal mountain in between me and where the satellites were, basically. Other than that, it worked every time. So there was never a message that I couldn't send on this thing eventually. Now, the connectivity issues were I was in some pretty serious terrain. So I didn't take it easy on myself. The very first place I went to was Sangre de Cristos in South Central Colorado. They're kind of known as being like probably the hardest place to hunt in Colorado. While I was there, 2 individuals were airlifted out of there. The first guy, he impaled his calf with an arrow. I think the story goes that it fell out and he basically walked into it or backed into it or something like that, and was obviously bleeding a good bit. So they airlifted him out. The second individual, the news article isn't really very specific, but the rumor mill kind of says that he killed an elk and was packing that with some buddies and fell. The news article said he fell 100 feet in rocky terrain. So, I mean, that's very understandable in that area. It's very steep, it's very loose, and there's lots of rocky terrain. So, when I saw that, I was like, yeah, of course. I mean, that totally makes sense. In the higher elevations, there was cell service, so this thing was kind of moot. But in the valleys, where there was SOS on my phone, this guy still sent and received messages. That's kind of how I was testing it. I was sending and receiving messages with this, assuming if it can send a message, it'll send and receive an SOS if I need it to. So that was kind of my main concern. But yeah, I mean, $150 for a little bit of peace of mind, and it weighs nothing. And the best part about this device, and I've heard this from a lot of other SOS satellite communication devices, I left it on the whole time, day and night. I just made the decision to leave it on. I had, battery backups for my phone, my watch, my camera, all that good stuff. So I figured if I had to charge this thing, I can, but I never had to. In the first 4 days, it got down to like 89%. When I was done the last couple of days, it got down to 85%. It got a little colder. That's incredible, man. You could literally leave this thing on for like 2 weeks at that point. Like, that's insane. It didn't go below 80%. Like, I'm super impressed with the battery life on this little guy. If you're at all interested in one of these things, I'm going to leave a link to it down below. It is an Amazon affiliate link. It will help me out if you purchase through that link. Again, with Amazon, it's like $149.99. It comes with the year plan, and you're in good shape from there. So, I mean, it doesn't really get any better than that. If you guys like this kind of content, go ahead and leave me a like. If you're new to this channel and you like hunting and fishing content, go ahead and subscribe. And if you have any questions, go ahead and leave them in the comments down below. And as always, go adventure.